Well, hey folks, what's the possibility that Rex Heuermann, the accused Gilgo Beach serial killer, killed more people than the folks that he's charged with? The prosecutor wants a new DNA swab. My question, have they run out of samples from the pizza crust? Well, hey everybody, I'm Mike King from Profiling Evil, and I appreciate you joining us for this special video on the Long Island serial killer case. I mean, what are the probabilities that the same predator killed all those people? The people whose bodies were uncovered along the parkway. I hope you'll take a moment, hit that like and subscribe button, and ring the bell so that you're getting all of our videos here at Profiling Evil. When you hit the notification button, you should end up being the first to know. Well, last night I joined Vinnie Politan on Court TV alongside colleagues Joseph Scott Morgan and Dr. Carol Lieberman as we discussed the possibility that Rex Heuermann is responsible for the murders of all 11 plus victims who have been located along the shores of Long Island, New York. The question in everybody's mind, including all of the comments that are coming in on social media, swirl around whether it's possible to determine where the actual murders occurred. Now, before I answer this question, I want you to just take a moment and think about the amount of risk that an offender would have to take in order to commit crimes like this in public locations. The Parkway is an incredibly busy area most days, and frankly most nights, all daylight hours probably. Now, it's true that there are periods of time when the Parkway might have stretches of highway void of traffic, but pulling alongside the side of a road to commit an assault, a murder, and potentially mutilate a body, then dispose of the body, all takes an incredible amount of time. Think about how unsecure this is from the standpoint of somebody like a serial killer who wants to keep control of the situation. The risk of somebody driving along that same route, that same road, at that same time is incredibly high. Now, doing something like this really increases the predator's risk of exposure. And I want you to just think for a moment about your own experiences on a back road. I'm up here at my cabin right now, and every once in a while I get an urge and I think I'm going to go out for a ride, and I'm probably not going to see anybody because it's a weekday and it's quiet up here. There's 5,000 acres to explore. But undoubtedly, I run across somebody. So, you might be all alone in your favorite country road, or even for our friends in Australia in the outback. You think you're alone, but I'm going to be really interested if any of you will be willing to share your comments down below about the times you've gotten off the beaten path, only to find that several other people had the exact same idea, at the exact same location, and frankly, at the exact time. Now, that individual might record your license plate number, or they might remember your appearance or the way your vehicle looked. And think about the Gilgo Beach murder case. The fact that somebody actually described Heuermann and his uniquely similar truck. Now, Vinnie Politan asked me some very similar questions about this issue, and I offered these comments. Let's watch.
But where were the victims killed? Where were they killed? Let's talk about that. Also joining us, retired police commander, host of the Profiling Evil podcast, Mike King, who is joining us tonight. To me, this is a huge unanswered question. Mike King, I'll start with you. How do you, if he doesn't speak, right? If he doesn't speak, how are you going to figure out, or can you figure out, where these victims were murdered?
Well, we know a couple of things right off the bat. We know the last known location, so potentially the initial contact site, and we also know the disposal site. So somewhere in between those two places, then we can start figuring out where this may have occurred and where the actual crime scene is. I think the thing we have to consider, Vinny, is the amount of risk an offender would have to take to murder somebody and then stuff them in a bag and stuff them on the side of the road. So to do all of that out on the beach seems less likely to me. they've got to go to a place where there's some comfort. And this is where my buddy Joe Scott comes in, because I think we're going to see that there's some evidence in that home that might point back and tell us this is the location where the actual crime scene is. So we got to think about it. There's multiple crime scenes: the initial contact site, the actual place where the murders occurred, and then that disposal site where we know. And we know two pieces of the puzzle. It's now just figuring out the third.
But the real question on everybody's mind is there a connection between the 3 victims, which possibly could rise to 4 victims in the coming days where Heuermann's been charged, with these other victims that are along the Gilgo Beach and Long Island's beach system? There's certainly interesting things that have to be taken into account, like the physical location of the victims. And remember, they were primarily found within about 2 miles of each other. So I find it really interesting that they were also located on the similar sides of the street. Although I found some conflicting reports that suggest some of those bodies that were mutilated might have been in other locations, possibly. And since they were placed in different locations or recovered in different locations, it's possible that they were influenced in where they ended up by natural events like tidal influences, maybe movement of water or wind, or predators who get out and move pieces around. One question continues to circle around that Asian male, though, who was found in the same area as the rest of the victims. And I offered these comments on Court TV. Let's watch.
Mike King, your thoughts about any connection between the Gilgo Four and any of the other victims that have been found, the other 7?
Yeah, as an investigator, Vinny, I mean, one of the things you first focus on is the victimology and why does this person become a victim. So you have to look at not only the fact that we now know there's some internet searches that talk about looking for that pubescent teenage type individual, the fact that these women are physically small and could fit into that preferential victim kind of a role, the idea that they could be easily controlled. I think what we have to consider when we see an anomaly, like if this young Asian young man is involved in this series of serial killings, is it a mistake? He thought he was getting something that he didn't get once the deal started happening. Or is it a substitute victim because his preferential victim wasn't available, and so he had to just get a stage prop, so to speak, to satisfy these perversions and these predatory feelings that the individual has?
You know, there are so many unanswered questions in this case, and one that keeps coming up is whether this predator was purposely selecting women who had more youthful physical characteristics. Was it because the predator had a focus on this kind of a victim? Like I said on the video, this pubescent teenager? Or did it have more to do with the fact that he preferred petite victims? Possibly victims that were much easier to control. Now, I think this information is going to lead to an answer in the case as it unfolds in court. And we'll see more about the internet searches revealed in court, which I think are going to really tell us a lot about the kinds of things this predator was looking up. One thing we know for sure is that he was looking up information about young girls, and he also was looking up a young Asian male. Again, was it because he read the newspaper and is looking into it, or was he aware of that, or was it preferential in the way he liked to do things? This is all going to be really interesting, which brings me to my next point about the difference between a preferential victim and a substitute victim. The preferential victim might be someone in this case like a petite female. The substitute victim, that's somebody who ends up being in the wrong place at the wrong time, in the wrong circumstances. Situations where substitute victims become significant, like in this case perhaps, is where the predator is unable to fulfill this fantasy they have that's driving them toward this abduction and murder of this preferential victim. It really is all about what the preferential victim type is. And rather than simply call it a day and go home, the predator instead will look for a stage prop, a substitute to kind of fill it in, because, you know, it's really not as much about the victim as it is about fulfilling the fantasy that the predator has. And this isn't meant to minimize the victim's suffering in any way. It's only to look at this from a victimology standpoint. And the question remains the same. Why was this person selected as a victim? What was it about the victim and their characteristics that can teach us a little more about this predator's preference? Personally, I don't believe that all of the victims found along the Long Island roadway are victims of the same serial killer. Now, I've mentioned this before, but people like Shannon Gilbert. She clearly is a victim. She clearly died unexpectedly, and it was a tragic death, I guess as all deaths are. But there are so many unanswered questions. I get that the private investigation has suggested that maybe her hyoid bone was damaged. There also are the government investigations that say that's not the case, that she died from exposure. There are so many unanswered questions, and there are publicly reported elements that suggest that she wasn't part of this whole thing. Now, that might upset a few of you. And I've been wrong before, so please don't take it offensively. But think of the other victims for a moment. It's really possible that the predator could be the same. I mean, Rex Heuermann is 59 years old. That's pretty dang old for an active serial killer. Most are in the range of 24 to 35 years old statistically. But that would mean that if he is the predator, he would have had to evolve over time. Now, initially, he could have been very systematic and very organized, if in fact it's the same person. He may have cut up his victims and deposited their body parts in different locations to improve his chances of never being discovered. When the bodies did go for so long without being discovered, he might have got a little bit lazy. Or it could be that he started to become a little disorganized over time and realized that it's a whole lot easier just to stuff them in a burlap bag and throw them on the side of the road. Regardless, geography is incredibly important in these kinds of investigations, and I offered these thoughts on Court TV.
And as far as the location, you got to take into account the fact that they're all discovered in a pretty close area. And if you looked at like what Matt was showing earlier on that map, the fact that if it's possible that Heuermann left his home and went straight east and then comes south and down along that parkway, all of those are going the direction he would be traveling westbound to make a full loop to head back home. It's 29 minutes if he goes east. It's 22 if he goes south or west. So it's a pretty easy loop for the guy to make. Easy. And it puts him right where he needs to be. And I'll tell you what, in the middle of the night, I've been on that road. Even in the middle of the night, you can have stretches of time when there's not a vehicle in sight.
Well, what are your thoughts on this one, folks? I mean, I hope you'll join me on Court TV tonight as we continue the discussion around the Long Island serial killer case, most specifically the Gilgo Beach Four. I want to remind you that Heuermann is considered innocent until he's proven guilty in a court of law. Just remember that comment that was made through his lawyer, which was, quote, "I did not do this," close quote. Well, reports are that the medical staff in the jail have placed Rex Heuermann on suicide watch. And although he's made his court appearance this week, there's a ton of stuff yet to unfold in the case. Now, we're going to continue to watch it closely, and I hope you will too. And I want to say thanks for supporting Profiling Evil. I hope you'll hit the like and subscribe button. I hope you'll choose to join our channel memberships. My favorite's the Academy level, where you get the opportunity to learn a little bit more ahead of anybody else. It's a great way to support us here at Profiling Evil, and we really appreciate it. And we hope that you'll look for us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you're one of those folks that are trying out Thread, we've even got a Thread account. So we'll be looking for you. Now, if you like audio podcasts, check out Profiling Evil Podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. Hey, thanks so much for your support of Profiling Evil, folks. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.